Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name's Kate if you're new, and today we're going to be doing a wrap up on my year of reading goals. I basically rounded up a bunch of fantasy series in which I had at least started the first book but had not yet finished the series, and decided that 2021 was going to be the year that I tried to tackle that list and finish off some dang series. So let's get into how I did. So, first on the list is one that I just recently finished in December. It was the Dominion of the Fallen Trilogy. The House of Shattered Wings is book one of the series, which I read, I believe, when it came out, which was in 2015. So I read this book over 5 years ago, and then I read the second book, I believe, also when it came out maybe a year or two later, House of Binding Thorns, and then I just finished this third book this year, and this was the only book that I had left to read in the series. This series was delightful. I have talked about this series before on my channel. It was in my top 5 books of the year, which I believe should be up by the time this video is up, so I'd recommend you go watch that for more in-depth discussions of why these books are so great, but I absolutely adored them. They are like post-apocalyptic war-torn Paris, but where the war was between these warring houses of fallen angels. It's super queer, it's super politicky, but it's got really interesting magic. It's a big old blend of like Christian mythology and traditional Vietnamese mythology. The author herself is biracial of French and Vietnamese, and I love this series. You should really, really check them out. More people need to be talking about these. So the Dominion of the Fallen series, a task was pretty easy. I only had one book to read. The next one that I did was a little bit more daunting, which was the entire trilogy of the Collegia Magica books by Carol Berg. I had started book one. Please ignore the bad covers. Carol Berg is constantly struck with the curse of the bad covers. The books are delightful. But I had started book one over and over and over again, and I kept getting slowed down in the admittedly slightly slow beginning to this series, and it wasn't grabbing me. But I knew, because I love Carol Berg, that if I got past that slightly slow start, I would just want to devour the series. So I switched to audiobook for this one and tricked my brain into ignoring the slightly slow start, and then we were off. I read the entire trilogy in about a month, which for an adult fantasy series is really fast. Not because they take that long to read necessarily in and of themselves, but because usually when I finish a book in a series, I don't really want to just jump right into the next one. I want to take kind of a breather, digest the book, read something that's tonally different, and then I'll, once I've had that break, dive in, all is good. I did not do that with this series. I finished book one, went immediately into book two, finished book two, went immediately into book three, and I just devoured them. They are so good. These are also in my top 5 of the year, so I'm not going to talk too much about them, but what Carol Berg does best is kind of take real historical settings, kind of file the serial numbers off them, work in really cool magic systems, and then oftentimes write kind of like a murder mystery in them. Not always, but in this particular case, it does begin with a kind of attempted murder mystery, in that there is an assassination attempt on the king, and he hires his magicless cousin, who is also the librarian of the magic school, to investigate because there were some magical elements to the assassination. If you like murder mysteries / political intrigue, if you like really interesting, cool world building and very fun, diverse characters, I think you should check Carol Berg out, despite the bad covers. Maybe I should do a video about that, about her different book series and why you should read them despite the terrible covers. So once I finished the Collegia Magica series, I felt like I was just on a bit of a Carol Berg kick. So I went straight into her, what is this one called? This is Sanctuary. Her Sanctuary duology. I read Dust and Light, the first book, I think when it came out, which was, let's find it, 2014, okay. And so I needed to reread this book and then read Ash and Silver because I could remember almost nothing about this book. This one also kind of a magical murder mystery. The main character is Lucien de Remini, who is a pureblood, which in this society means someone who is of a lineage that has magic. And it also comes with a whole bunch of restrictions and a whole bunch of privileges. So they have to wear a half mask when they are in the presence of non-magical people. They are not allowed to marry as they please. Their marriages are arranged by their families. And if they break any of the many, many tenets that rule purebred life, pureblood life, I forget. Pureblood, right. If they break any of the rules that the pureblood registry has set up, they become social outcasts. So this book begins when the main character finds himself suddenly outcast, and he doesn't really understand why. And he is sent off to basically complete an apprenticeship to a city mortician, essentially, because the way that his magic works is that he can sort of draw magically a true likeness of someone. And so he draws the faces of unknown dead people so that they can pass the images around and try to get them identified, essentially, which is not what he thought he was going to be assigned. And he always played by pureblood rules, except for a time that he had a dalliance with a non-pureblood woman. And he is now sort of realizing that this may be the repercussions of that. But then it kind of turns out that there might be some other things going on. But then while he is also working at the morticians, he draws the likeness of a murdered young girl, and when he sort of comes out of his magical trance, realizes that he's drawn her in royal clothing, and they realize that she is in fact a royal bastard. And they basically start realizing that someone is murdering the bastards of one of the three princes that is currently trying to seize the throne, because there's also this whole civil war going on. So I really enjoyed this series. The reason that it was not on my top 5 of the year is, one, because I didn't want to have 2 Carol Berg series, but also because the ending is a little weird. In fact, the whole second book is pretty weird. And I don't want to spoil it, but there's just a lot of stuff with memory magic, shall we say, and it just goes in a whole different direction than where I thought it was going to be going. Which is not to say that it was bad. It was really interesting and really cool. I really enjoyed a lot of the characters. I just didn't quite know what to do with it by the time I'd finished. It was a slightly strange ending. I do, however, now that I've read this duology, want to reread the companion duology to this series, which I don't unfortunately own physical copies of. I borrowed them from a friend, and they are now living across the country, so I don't really have access to those anymore. And they also were not super popular, so it's difficult to find them used. So I need to find copies of those, but those were the Lighthouse duology, so they're set in the same place and at the same time, roughly, but they have 2 completely different main characters and totally different storylines. And I read that, like, Lighthouse duology, again, also a murder mystery, many years ago. I want to say like early 2010s. So I don't remember them very well, but I remember really, really liking them. So at some point that's going to be on my list. But anyway, wouldn't necessarily say to start with these if you were going to read Carol Berg. I would say you could start with the Collegia Magica series. That series I think is maybe a little bit more accessible. This one got a little strange. All right, so next on my list of series that I actually did manage to finish this year was the Divine Cities trilogy by Robert Jackson Bennett. This was another one where I only had to read the last book in the trilogy, which was City of Miracles. The previous titles are City of Stairs, which is the first one, and City of Blades. The first one is kind of a murder mystery that kind of tends to be a theme, I'm realizing, in a lot of the books that I read. But this series reminded me a lot of The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. They both deal with like the aftermath of the fall of divinity, like what happens when you kill or severely weaken a god. However, by the end of this series, the last books in particular had too many similarities to the point where I ended up finishing this series and I was just kind of like, huh, okay, so that was a less good 100,000 Kingdoms. So it's not even that this series was bad, it's that for me, 100,000 Kingdoms is a 5-star series, and this was more of a like 3.5 to 4-star series. Like, still good. I enjoyed these books. But if I'm gonna want to read something that gives me 100,000 Kingdoms vibes, I'm just gonna read 100,000 Kingdoms. So, do I think that these are worth your time? Probably, yeah. But also, you should read 100,000 Kingdoms first, because it's better. And then if you just want something to scratch that itch, then you could try out these. All right, so I have a few more. Another series that I did only have to read the final book for, and I did not have to reread the first book, was I finished the Silver Phoenix duology. Hello, Smudge. By Cindy Pun. So I read Silver Phoenix. Thanks, buddy. Quite some time ago. It was after it came out by maybe a year or two, I think, which was in 2009. Yeah, so I think it was more like 2012, 2013. It had been a while, at any rate. But Fury of the Phoenix is the follow-up to Silver Phoenix, and they are based heavily on Chinese mythology. One of the things that I really like about Cindy Pun's writing is she's really, really into food in a way that makes me really hungry and want to eat everything that she's writing about. So I've read other series by Cindy Pun. I think I've enjoyed her sci-fi Taiwan one the best so far. So there's kind of two storylines in this one. The first one is Eiling's story, who was the main character in book 1, and her going on a new adventure and chasing down the boy that she loves because she gets this like prophetic vision of him being in danger and rushes onto a ship to go save him. And then there's also a sort of past timeline flashback storyline, which is the backstory of the villain from Silver Phoenix, who was essentially a man who turned to dark arts and started sucking people's souls in order to be immortal, as you do. So while I did enjoy this series, I think I gave it around 3.5 stars. It hasn't really stuck with me too much. I read it in May and I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I did enjoy it. And I've really enjoyed other things by Cindy Pun as well, particularly her Want series. So before I get into the series that I wanted to finish that I didn't actually get to, I did also finish a couple of bonus series that I hadn't talked about in the video, but do actually fit the criteria in that I read book 1 sometime before 2021 and had not yet finished the rest of the series. So the first of these were the, what is it called? The Decoy Princess series, I think. The first book is called The Decoy Princess, and the second book is called Princess at Sea. It is written by Dawn Cook, which I believe is a pen name for, I think, Kim Harrison, who wrote a like super trashy paranormal romance series. These are fun, but they feel a little bit unfinished. Like, there are only 2 books out. There will probably only ever be 2 books out. But it feels like she kind of had plans for more that just doesn't really get explored. So in the first book, the main character, who believes herself to be the heir princess of a kingdom with some kind of prophecy over her head about her marriage bringing doom or something like that, finds out that she is not, in fact, the biological daughter of the king and queen. She is an orphan who was swapped out and used as a decoy, which, because of this prophecy, there have been a ton of assassination attempts made on her throughout her whole life. And she is told that basically they sent off their biological child and they have been raising her and they do love her, but she is not actually the heir to their throne. However, right after finding this out, her parents are both brutally murdered by a guy who is infiltrating the kingdom and trying to marry the princess in order, because he's like the 6th son or something and wants to take over the throne. His motivations don't matter. So the thing is that there's this undercurrent in this series about something happening that's way more interesting, which is this idea of the game. And like, she finds out that essentially her bodyguard, like the captain of the guard, is part of this like shadow organization of like assassins, and they're called themselves players, and they are kind of like behind the scenes pulling the strings of most major historical events over the past, few centuries, and that she's been kind of groomed in order to be his successor. And so there's a lot in that, but it doesn't super get explored very much. At least not in the first two books. She also gets caught in this love V that I was never super invested in. I did have a preference, and she did end up with the person that I preferred, thankfully. Yeah, while I, again, enjoyed this series, I think I gave it around 3 stars, I don't feel like I'm necessarily going to reread it unless she decides to write more in the series at some point and get more into the kind of meaty political intrigue stuff that I was really interested in. Okay, and so the final bonus series that I read, I can't honestly really believe that I did this to myself, but I finished the ACOTAR series. I read A Court of Thorns and Roses, I can't remember how long now, some amount of years ago, and I was not impressed. But given the fact that I had completely failed out of Throne of Glass after like 3 chapters, actually managing to finish ACOTAR was an improvement. I was like, hey, that was better. She improved a little bit. And then, I don't know, I just kept hearing that the second book in the trilogy was the best. And I was like, some of the things that she writes about kind of are good for me in an id way, like this whole soul bonding mate thing. I do kind of enjoy that as a trope. So I was like, fine, I'll give it one more shot. And so I read A Court of Mist and Fury. I believe it was Sam from Thoughts on Tomes that like finally got me to read it, where she was like, oh, it's the best one. I love it so much. It's so good. Especially because she hates book 1. She thinks it's trash. And I was like, I also thought it was trash. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. It was better. It was better than ACOTAR. I will give it that. I enjoyed Rhysand so much more than I hated Tamlin. Tamlin was the worst. He's so boring. Even when he's supposed to be all romantic and dreamy, I was like, he's so boring. And then he turned abusive all of a sudden, and I was just like, oh, that twist, cool. Glad I was not super invested in you. And I was just, Rhys is more my type anyway, in terms of fictional love interests. Not real ones, but fictional ones. Delightful. So, I think I gave Akamath like 4 stars, whereas I gave ACOTAR like 2. So I did enjoy it better. And then I just have this thing where if I only have one more book to finish a series, then I kind of gotta read it. If I only read the first book and I decide I don't like it, I don't need to read the rest of them. But if I only have one left, I kind of need to do it. So I got A Court of, what was it? Wrath and Ruin or whatever it was. Act of War, something, I think. I forget and possibly don't care. I got that one out of the library. I didn't pay for any of these. I got them all. I think I maybe paid for the first one where I bought it on sale for like $2 on Kindle. The rest of them I got out of the library. But Act of War was like fine. It was fine. I didn't really like it as much as Akamath. I didn't hate it as much as ACOTAR. It was fine. Will I read the Nesta one? Court of Frost and Starlight, I think. No, Frost and Starlight is the novella, which I will absolutely not be reading. What was it? Court of Silver Flames? Is that the one? I think so. Will I read that one? I don't know. I have heard that there was a threesome scene between Nesta, Azriel, and Cassian that the editors made Sarah J. Maas cut, which, like, first of all, cowards. Second of all, I might just search AO3 and see if I can find some good fan fiction of it, because I just have a feeling that some of the fan fiction might be better than the actual series. So maybe we'll try that instead. But I don't know. Will I read it? Maybe if my library has it and I'm feeling lazy and I just want to read something that's pretty popcorny, maybe. But I don't know. Also, I cannot believe I actually finished that series this year. Okay, so While I did manage to read a lot this year, I finished a bunch of series. I'm pretty proud of me. Not everything that I mentioned in that video was something that I actually ended up finishing. The first of these is the Trader Baru Cormorant series by Seth Dickinson, or I think it's the Baru Cormorant series, whatever it is. This is a queer political intrigue novel, but I started reading it right after reading Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth. I was like, I need more queer fantasy. So I started the Trader Baru Cormorant. The thing is, this is a queer woman of color written by a straight white man. And it's not that it's bad, it's just that it's really depressing. Like, she's infiltrating this empire as a civil servant in order to kind of dismantle it on the inside as revenge for what they did to her queer polyamorous family, where they kind of disappeared one of her fathers. And it's well written, but I just am not in the mood to read about queer woman of color tragedy written by a straight white man. It's just not a thing I'm into anymore, so I don't think I'm gonna finish this series. I might just stick at having read about half of book one and say, you know what? I'm done. This is just a DNF for me, I think. So on a series that is absolutely not going to be a DNF, I just did not get to it this year. I did not finish the Queen's Thief series by Megan Whalen Turner. Why, you may ask? Because this final book scares me, and I haven't had the courage yet. I've also decided that I need to reread The King of Atolia, because the main narrator for Return of the Thief is a minor character in King of Atolia, and I remember almost nothing about him. So I would like to reread this book to refresh my memory on who this dude actually is, and then I would like to read Return of the Thief. So this is my new goal. That'll probably be in my 2022 reading goals video, which hopefully will be up after this. I adore this series, but Return of the Thief scares me because I don't know what I'm gonna do once this series is over. Because I love it so much. And also, what if she messes up the ending? Like, I know she's not gonna, she's an amazing writer, but what if she does? I don't know what to do with myself. Anyway, we'll get to it. So the final series that I talked about in my video but did not actually manage to finish was the California Bones trilogy by Greg Van Eekhout. I think it's actually called the Daniel Blackland trilogy, which is the name of one of the main characters. I did start book 2 in 2021, but I did not manage to finish it. So book 2 is Pacific Fire. I am currently reading it. I'm about, I don't know, a little less than halfway through, and I am enjoying this series still immensely. It is a alternate history of our world fantasy where essentially alchemists discovered ways to use the mummified fossilized remains of extinct and magical creatures to grind up their bones and eat them, ingest them in, and gain their powers. So the state of California split off from the rest of the United States and was then further divided into the kingdoms of Northern and Southern California. The kingdom of Southern California revolves heavily around the La Brea tar pits. And it's such a cool magic system. Greg Van Eekhout is a San Diego author, so I knew him when I worked at the independent bookstore when I lived in San Diego many years ago. And I just am really enjoying this series. It's very heisty. In the first one, for sure, and the second one is looking to also be somewhat heisty. So yeah, if you're looking for Team of Misfits, Found Family, heists, you could do worse than the California Bones series. I will let you know how I feel about the series once I finish it, because that is going to be a goal for this year, because I am in the middle of book 2 and I'm really enjoying it. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Recommend it so far. So that is everything for the series that I set out to finish and check off in 2021. I am pretty damn proud of myself. I finished a lot of stuff.